level with me. How many kobolds can you take in a fight? That's a weird intro, man. Hello and welcome to Level With Me, the YouTube channel where we can level up our TTRPG experience together. My name is Will and today I'm going to be breaking down my video from last week, D&D, but everyone is a kobold. If you want to know how it runs, go and check that video out before coming over here, where I'm going to be breaking everything down step by step as to what happened during that absolute madness. But before I do that, this is your reminder that we work with shared experience at this table, so any tips, tricks, suggestions or thoughts on the subject, leave them down in the comment section below to dish out some experience points to the rest of the players in our community. So the TLDR of last week's video is kobolds are squishy and you don't need to put like mad challenging hurdles in front of them. They have 5 HP and only 1 positive ability score. They're not built like your superhuman player characters that you would usually play. So you can actually make up your own one-shot with ease. You don't have to put lots of thought into it. But the outcome is still going to be hilarious no matter what you do. Like I said in the last video, this plot was taken from Luke Westaway and Oxventure's D&D but everyone is a kobold session, but you can fill in the blanks as and when. You can use the premise of this plot and then do whatever you like. It's just a stepping stone and it's really easy to change around and explain how you can change everything at the end of the video. So the premise for this story is that you are a bunch of kobolds who have never left the den. You have been there for decades, for centuries, but unfortunately the den mother has been taken ill by a mysterious illness, and the sages within that den know of only one cure, somewhere where kobolds have not been for generations. You have to go to the surface. So it doesn't sound too world-ending. However, you got to remember kobolds are small creatures who don't often do interactions with the outside world. So you can really play up to that fact with whatever hurdles you choose to put in their way. So it could be super mundane, and I swear down, most of these challenges, super mundane. Really mundane. With the premise out the way, let's get into how I ran this one shot. The challenges that I gave my group of kobolds were a chasm to get out of the cave and to the surface, bear traps outside the cave, a raging river, spiders in the deepest, darkest section of the woods, a pit in a cornfield laid out by a hunter who then appears trying to nab one of the kobolds. After they dealt with the hunter, the next challenge is to get into town to find the botanist, to find the rare herb that is needed to heal the den mother, and then simply getting back to the den, which was so dramatic the way I did it. The first round of kobolds are drawn, and they have to get over a chasm to get out of the cave. Crossing the chasm actually turned out to be really easy. They rolled really well on their wisdom perception checks to notice that there was a thin tightrope to the far left of the chasm. They rolled really well with their dexterity to get across, and I asked, can you just roll dexterity to jump down the jagged rocks at the end to land safely? Every player did it, apart from the last one, who rolled a natural 1. And I really feel in my brain, I said, I have to set the precedence for this session. They need to know that it's going to be a silly session and I am trying to kill their characters in the most ridiculous way possible. This is one of those moments. So this kobold who rolled the natural 1 has watched all her fellow kobolds climb down the rock to safety, and maybe they're thinking, oh, this is going to be easy, we're going to go out, get the herb and come back, all before dinner. No, that kobold won't be making it home for dinner. That kobold went to climb down to the jagged rocks, slipped, hit every rock on the way down and snapped their ankle at the bottom on some uneven surface before rolling back into the chasm. Insta-death. Please choose another kobold. After that, they all kind of understood what this session was going to be. When your player characters need a new kobold, they can simply choose another number, like I did on my 100 kobold Google Doc, or they can choose a name out of a hat if it's in person. However, this is now up to the DM of how they introduce the next kobold. Me, personally, I got the new kobold to do the role for the previous challenge. So my player picked a new kobold, and she had to roll dexterity again to go over the tightrope, and dexterity again to climb down the rocks. both of which she passed. If you really want to be mean in this session, ask the new Kobold to roll all the previous challenges to catch up. That would take up a lot of people's time, wouldn't it? So the way I ran it was just pass the previous check and then you'll join the party. Upon exiting the cave, new Kobold in tow, I asked the group to make a wisdom perception check. 4 of them passed, 1 of them did not. And that one Kobold stood directly in a bear trap, taking 1d6 piercing damage. Now, Kobolds have only got 5 HP, so when you're dealing out damage, you really need to think about what dice you're going to use for each one. Again, bear trap, I think 1d6 is fair. If they're dropping something heavy on their foot, 1d4, they're not going to die from that most likely. However, like I said in the last video, if they're being hit by a boulder, make that your 1d12, because they still might survive it. So, that Kobold that trod in the bear trap survived the initial 1d6 piercing damage. After they stepped in it, I asked them to make a strength saving throw to try and pull the bear trap apart. They failed that, it clamps back down on the legs. Please choose a new Kobold after bleeding out. During the game, there will be some Kobolds that stick with you. It was at this moment the player drew Jun the Forgetful, and what I really hoped the player would do was walk up to a bear trap and go, "What's that?" and head straight in, instant death. They didn't, they were sensible, so we moved straight along. After they emerged from the tree line, they reached a river, the water raging and lapping viciously against the bank that they were stood on. I described there were stepping stones across the river, but they'd have to make 2 back-to-back successful dexterity rolls to pass the river. 3 players passed dexterity rolls back-to-back to get to the other side of the river. The other 2 players asked to roll perception for fallen logs to make a bridge. I said, yeah, of course. DMs, you have to yes and. Kobolds are bad. If they want to do something, try your best to fit it into the story. They pass and find some big logs that they can carry over to the first half of the river. One Kobold, however, failed the strength check and dropped the log on their foot, taking 1d4 damage. No harm, they still survive. They built the bridge over the first half of the river, and both went to make the dexterity checks. One player did it no issue. The last player failed and got washed down river, and it was at this point my players said, "Can't we do anything?" I said, "Yes. Make a strength check to catch their hand," and in my head all I was thinking was, this is the chance to take out 2 Kobolds in one. So the other player who crossed the river using the half a bridge reaches out their hand to grab the Kobold in the river and fails. 2 Kobolds wash down river, never to be seen again. 2 new Kobolds arrive at the riverbank and decide to again make a perception check for building a bridge over the second half of the river. One player rolled a natural 20, so I described how they pick up this log and basically juggle it over to the second half of the river. Without thinking, they say, "I want to try and cross the river now." So I lowered the DC of the dexterity needed to cross it, as they did now have a sturdier walking level, and this player passed. The second player rolled a natural 1, so I described her character to walk up to a tree and just kick it with her foot. The tree fell on her. 1d8 bludgeoning damage. Please choose another Kobold. And is it sadistic to say that I'm really happy that this happened to this particular player? Because they have very loud facial expressions and they couldn't hide their surprise and anger, and they found it funny, and just so many emotions went over her face. It was so good to watch over Discord. So the first batch of Kobolds, 3 make it over successfully, 2 are washed down river, 2 new Kobolds arrive, 1 passes the dexterity checks, and then they turn around and see a fallen log and a little Kobold hand laying underneath it. A new Kobold is picked and emerges at the tree line. And remember how I said that some Kobolds stay with you? Yeah, this is one of those moments. Player picked a new Kobold, and that new Kobold was Jesus the Pure. I gave some of the Kobolds in the list special features that only they could do. Jesus' special feature was that they could walk on water. So this Kobold emerges at the tree line, passes another Kobold crushed by a tree, and just walks across the torrent of water. It was such a good pull for that moment. And the adventure continues. They traipse deep into the forest across the river, and here's where I make a mistake, if you want to call it that. I describe the canopy as being so thick that sunlight can't reach it, and kobolds have a feature that is sunlight sensitivity. If they're in combat in the sunlight, they roll all their attacks with disadvantage. So, when they roll a nature check and realize that there are giant spiders around them, they're not rolling at disadvantage. And one of my players took great pleasure in going, actually, didn't you say the canopy was too thick for sunlight to get through? And I was like, damn, he's got me there. Very well done. Really got a grasp at all the straws as a kobold, haven't you? So, along with the fact that they weren't rolling at disadvantage, and pack tactics, another kobold feature, they actually didn't take any damage against the spiders. The spiders rolled awfully, they rolled fantastic, took out 2 spiders, no issue. The adventure continues. I was very surprised at this. The brave kobolds survive the deep dark forest and come out to a hillock that overlooks a cornfield. After rolling perception, they notice a tent across the field, a campfire lightly smoking, but more importantly, bear traps that look oddly familiar to the ones that killed their friends at the start of their adventure. The players asked to sneak through the cornfield to try and get closer to the campsite. I asked them to make a dexterity saving throw, of which they failed, and fell into a pit placed by the hunter in the middle of the cornfield. It created a loud thud, and then I asked the other kobolds to make a perception check. They succeed and realize that the corn is starting to sway and vibrations are coming through the floor as if someone is coming towards them. The hunter approaches. Having failed to free the kobold in the pit, the captured kobold is caged and taken back to the campsite. When they arrive at the campsite, the fire is burning, the bear traps are leant up against some crates, the caged kobold is across from them, and the hunter is in the tent. Now, I rolled perception multiple times to see if the hunter realized that they were out there, and he rolled so badly that the kobolds managed to get through so much and plan so much. And this is the most murder hobo-y I've ever seen my friends in a D&D session. Should we burn the tent with him in it? Should we place bear traps dotted around? Should I pee in the stew that he's making? Yep, that was an option. However, what I definitely did not see coming was the cage kobold metagaming and saying, well, I could just commit seppuku and respawn as a new kobold. That is so metagamery, but I didn't expect it, and it was really clever, so I let him have it. And you know what? The perception rolls from the hunter were that bad that they did everything. They lit a fire at the end of the tent, forcing the hunter to emerge from the front of the tent where they laid a bear trap that snapped on his leg. While he was writhing on the floor, he watched his capture for the day stab himself with its own dagger before falling to the floor. And after all of that, one of the kobolds chucked some pea-filled stew all over him. My friends are weird. The new kobold, Dreep the Flammable, steps out from the cornfield, very much into that scene from Community where everything's on fire. There was so much going on. After a quick perception check, they find a book, a botanist book, with a leaf on the front that resembles the mystical herb that they are after. They flick through it and find an address in a nearby town where they could find this herb. So they flee to town, leaving the chaos and the hunter behind them. Now, as a DM, I don't mind if you need to go to the bathroom mid-scene. If you need to go to the bathroom, I will try not to further any plot points while they're away, but you know what? This session has no real plot. So my players came up with a plan. When they arrived at the town, they saw that the gate was being guarded by 2 spearmen, and this is when one of the players said he was going to go to the bathroom. And my other players took their shot. They took their shot here, and it paid off. 3 of the other players hid in the long grass by the town, whilst the other player ran directly to the spearmen and said, "There's a monster out there, you need to strike them down." After a bad insight roll by the spearmen to not realize that this is a monster, maybe we should kill this, the spearmen run out and without hesitation kill the kobold, who is currently AFK. They're probably just chilling there, T-posing, doing their default animation, and now they've been stabbed. This offered an opportunity for the 3 other kobolds in the long grass to sneak past and get into town. My friend came back from the bathroom and he did find it very funny on the whole. He was shocked, but I was just like, choose another kobold. Sorry mate. Welcome back. He picked his new kobold and it came out as Plonk the Oily, sibling of Dreep the Flammable, and that will come up later, who self-proclaimed is so greasy that they can slide around instead of walking. Something, 2 kobolds end up in a tavern with a spearman, something, 3 spearman helmet, something, they find their way into the botanist. I really don't know what happened there, but I was yes-anding everything they were doing. It was at this moment when they arrived at the botanist that one of my friends who was doing like back-to-back 12-hour shifts on a cinematography job said he really couldn't concentrate and he wasn't really feeling it at the minute. I was like, hey, that's fine. You want to go to bed? Go to bed. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna go. So we all said goodnight to him, and I said, before you leave, your kobold explodes. You don't need context. Your kobold explodes. Good night. Anyway, we move. The botanist was actually really easy. There was no damage taken. It was getting late into the evening. It's probably about 10:30. We'd been playing for 2.5 hours at this point, so I just made all the DCs really low just so we could rattle on through this bit. They managed to climb the shelves to get the mystical herb, and they returned out to the street. And this is where I changed up from Luke Westaway's story. This is where Westaway ended the session because, of course, on stage they only have limited time. So you get back to the Den Mother, you heal her, you save the day.
And you plunge the leaf into your queen's mouth. You move her jaws like that, and she does a big fart. And feels all better. Hooray!
I did not do that. I created a montage of them trying to get back to the den, passing through all the obstacles that they had to get through. But now there shall be no respawns. 4 kobolds, 1 task. Return to the den safely with the herb. They head out of town and bump into the hunter returning from a hard day's work. The hunter, filled with anger, takes a shot at the kobold and misses. They run into the cornfield. They then return to the spider's den and I ask for a strength check to break through the spider's webs. 1 kobold doesn't make it. They return to the river and I ask for a dex check to pass over safely. 1 kobold doesn't make it. The 2 remaining kobolds hop, skip and jump their way through the remaining bear traps outside the cave. This is where Plonk the Oily's self-proclaimed greasiness comes back to bite them in the butt. They went to cross the tightrope, and I said, who goes first? And Plonk the Oily said that they would. I turned to the other kobold. She probably couldn't tell, it was on Discord. I looked at her Discord screen and said, you'll be rolling dexterity with disadvantage because, as Plonk the Oily has said, he's really greasy, and that tightrope is slippy now. She failed the check and falls to her death. And weirdly, this was the same person who lost their kobold to the chasm before. But Plonk the Oily returned safely to the den and was welcomed into the inner sanctum. And this is where I pulled off the best DMing I have improvised ever. This wasn't the plan before, but Plonk said he was a sibling of Dreep the Flammable. So I said that the herb needs to be burnt and wafted around the Den Mother for her to inhale. I said, you are asked to hold the herb out. You said you were flammable. I'm gonna roll 1d6 fire damage. There's a 1 in 3 chance that your kobold will not survive the adventure. And everyone fell silent on Discord. You could hear a pin drop. I roll the 1d6 and I say, Plonk the Oily, you are singed badly, but a 4 does not kill you. You survive the adventure and you save the Den Mother. Everyone celebrated this little kobold who could, and it was such a good feeling. Such a good feeling for everyone who took part in the session. Looking through the Google Docs, my friends went through 14 kobolds through the session, but I think I could have been really mean and gone through a lot more. This session was so much fun and it's so easily adaptable. You just use different settings and different obstacles and just fill in new names for the used kobolds. You can run this again and again and again, and I thoroughly suggest that you try out this genre of game style. So, what did you think about the adventure? And what obstacles would you place in this forest-based Kobold one-shot? Leave all your thoughts about how this genre can be improved in the comments, and I'll be sure to read them. See you in the next session.